I'm Renee Ballard, a design strategist and the host of Let's Talk Design, where we speak to the talented creators and creatives who work in the business of design. Today, we are joined with Damian O'Donnell. A bit about Damian. Damian is an independent business advisor who is based in Melbourne. He specialises in helping clients who could be at any stage of their business journey, from startup to step down. Before moving into this role, Damian's career has always been in finance and accounting. Initially starting his career as a CPA, in 1998, he took over his family practice, Hillard O'Donnell, which was founded by his grandfather in 1949. Damian ran the business for 22 years until 2020, when he sold it and then moved into consultancy. Combining his experience of being a CPA, a business owner, and now an advisor, Damian brings a wealth of knowledge and intel into what it takes to run a successful business. So although he's worked with various industries, it's his experience with working with designers, agencies, shop fitters that gives him firsthand insight into what it takes to make creative industries successful and what it is that's unique about them. Thank you for joining us today, Damian.
Thanks, Renee. Really nice to join you. Nice to looking forward to the chat.
So a bit of context about how we met. Many moons ago, maybe about, 85, 100 years ago.
Yeah, about that.
So long ago, I was 30 years old when I met
God.
you. I was working for a design agency down in Melbourne, who was one of Damian's clients, and I was in a PA role. So I would sit in on the finance meetings. And then when we launched Lex, Damian was our accountant until he sold the practice and he went into consultancy. So one of the reasons I wanted to speak to Damian on Let's Talk Design was Damian is one of those rare people in finance who understands the design industry and creatives and knows how to offer advice that can build long-term growth in a business and profitability with only making minor tweaks. So creativity can be hard enough and then commercializing it. But then when finance and the government and tax gets involved, it almost destroys us. So Damian certainly kept an even keel. Thank you. What's your insight into the design industry compared to the other industries? Like, how is it different? How is it the same?
That's a good question. In some ways, I'll disappoint you because in some ways, it's not unique at all. In that, it needs basic business strategies, like all businesses do. But in other ways, it has its own challenges. I guess that gets back to the fact that you're selling a concept, aren't you? You're talking to people about ideas, and ideas are intangible. So the best insight, I guess, I had into the design industry, and the ones who were good at it were the best communicators, the ones who could communicate the idea, the concept to the client. And it's no coincidence that the best communicators were usually also the best listeners. So they listened to what the client wanted. They communicated back to the client saying, this is what I'm hearing. Yes. And then they came up with a concept that the client wanted, not a concept that they really liked. So it's a bit like, you remember that old movie Tootsie? Like a lot of people listening might remember Tootsie, but Dustin Hoffman always said he was the best tomato on Broadway. But he didn't get a lot of jobs because the directors wanted lettuces or cucumbers, but he was the best tomato. And I always found that funny, but interesting because he didn't listen to what they wanted. He was playing his role, doing his thing. So I suppose if the question is what's unique about design, in some ways, as I said, not much, but in a lot of ways, what's unique about it is your whole day is spent trying to make the intangible tangible. And the people who are good at it are quite marvellous to watch, actually. Genius.
I think you raised a really good point as well between art and design. And where I see it is, art is quite boundaryless and it's for the sake thereof. And you add in, well, if we put art on this side, commerciality on that side, when they overlap, you can often get design because design is paid for creativity. Yeah, like you said, I think you can be, there are interior designers, I only do this style, but you have to build a profile where either the client likes that sort of style and or you're so rock star famous, people want your design name on their project. So I get what you mean.
And
I think
not all design is groovy and hip and groovy. Like, design a new spoon for me. Well, that's going to require a concept and it's going to require some creativity, but really it's not anything new. It's just another spoon. So there's the grounding part of design as well. It's not all up in the sky, up with the fairies. As I said before, the best designers will understand that and give the client what the client wants. Now, it might be not what the client imagined initially, but after conversation, I'll give them what they want.
Yeah, 100%. I think, I mean, just this is a bit of a tangent, but the advice, sometimes I do talks to universities of what graduates should expect because there's this inherited, sometimes snobbery amongst designers and things. And my biggest advice is fall in love with the project, whether you're designing the spoon, a ball
Yes.
bearing machine, or, redoing the interior of the opera house. Like, fall in love with it. Don't hold the project in contempt because then the creativity won't come through
Yes.
and the client will feel it.
No, brilliant. I think that's spot on. And that's probably true of a lot of professions. Like, imagine being a lawyer and trying to sell a will to someone. That's going to be hard because the person paying for the will often won't see the benefit of it. They'll be dead. But the lawyer's got to demonstrate that, you pay me $40,000 and I'll come up with the greatest will your ancestors, your beneficiaries have ever seen. And so the lawyer probably needs to be in love with that will, doesn't he or she? And
Yeah.
write and do a really good one, knowing that they're not going to probably get 40, they're probably going to get 10,000 for it, but it doesn't matter.
Yes. Yeah. And occasionally you do come across someone in any profession, like we're renovating our house at the moment, and occasionally we'll come across a supplier who is obsessed with their product. And whilst it's not my, tiling's not my jam, or, light design isn't my jam, but you'll come across an obsessive, and it's such a joy because they are in it with you.
Yes,
And
that's
it's
right.
lovely.
Yeah. No, I love that.
Mm.
It's the passion of, and I think it's a good point. A lot of designers have got a lot of passion. That's what I've seen. And it's not always effervescent extrovert passion, but it's there. And they'll get so excited about showing you the new drawing of something. And I often don't know what it is, or I can't see why it's great, but that says more about me. But no, passion's big. That's
Mm.
and probably once again, in a lot of professions or industries, you need that, especially if you're dealing with the public.
Yeah, absolutely. And is there anything that you've, in your experience dealing with designers and shop fitters in the industry that has surprised you that you didn't really know about the industry?
Probably a million things like that. The process is way broader than I ever thought. Like when I started working with people in design, I thought they kind of did a drawing and got a ruler out and measured a few things up and then said to the client, what do you reckon? But the idea of building a concept was really interesting when I first started dealing with designers. Yeah, what was that, 25 years ago, whatever. That's where you see the passion. But also that's where you see the skill. And I think that the designers who surprised me the most were the ones who, this will sound weird, but they didn't look like the skillful ones. They look like the ones just working away in the background, but they'd come up with something and you'd think, yeah, that's a great idea. So I suppose maybe they had the message, they heard the message from the client, getting back to that point again.
And what common mistakes do you see designers, agencies, shop fitters make?
When we first talked about this little discussion, I thought I'd better put a bit of thought into that because once again, there are common mistakes that a lot of people make across all sorts of industries. So I wrote down 8, and this is not exhaustive, but it's a list of 8. And I think you could apply it to many. But the first one is probably really applicable to designers or anyone in creative because I've worked with writers and actors as well over the years, and they're terrible at this. And designers, I think, are not quite as terrible, probably B grade terrible. Actors and writers are A grade terrible. But the first one is that they don't forecast their cash flow very well. So cash is king. And I've heard it all before. You can't forecast cash flow in design. It's too lumpy. You can't do it. Nonsense. You can do it. It's hard and you won't always get it right, but you can do it. So it's after coming up with your logo and going to the market, that's the second thing you do. You come up with a cash flow forecast and you have, without getting too boring for all the people who aren't interested in accounting, but you have the forecast cash flow in one column and the actual in the next. And every month you look at the forecast versus the actual and you build up a picture. And over time, you'll build up a picture. I guarantee it. So they don't do that. They don't forecast their cash or make an effort to forecast their cash. The other one is, which still surprises me, the lack of written contracts across the design industry. So many multi-million dollar design work, so much multi-million dollar design work is done after a few conversations and a few emails. And, oh, by the way, here are our terms of trade. It's just rubbish. So you could have the greatest design business in the world, but it's not worth anything if you haven't got contracts behind it. So if you want to sell your business one day, the person buying it's going to say, who do you work for? A, B, C, D, E, and show us the contracts. Oh, we haven't got any. Well, what am I buying? So contracts, big mistake if you don't make an effort to do that. The third one is not having a plan B when it comes to tight cash flow. So every business has to have an exit strategy. It's like when you're driving your car, consciously or subconsciously, we are looking for ways out if something goes wrong. If someone does something wrong in front of us, I'm looking to either brake or go left or go right or do something. We're thinking about that all the time. It's the same with having a plan B. Cash will get tight in design industry because it's lumpy. We all know that. That's the nature of the beast, which leads me to failure number 4. And I don't mean to be too negative, but it's probably one. Not having a solid relationship with your financier or bank or whoever it is. So if your bank or the person you're dealing with doesn't understand you, find someone else. Don't soldier on and just muddle through. You need to have a good relationship with a bank or a financier, because not paying your BAS and not paying your super and not paying yourselves, that's not a plan. You need to have access to cash one way or another. And in a way, it gets back to the first point, because if you go to a bank or financier with a solid cash forecast and a solid plan, they're more likely to deal with you. So number 5 is, and we touched on this before, trying to be all things to all clients. So you mentioned before the designer who gets a name and they're the guru in that area of design. They don't do that by chance. They do it because the name that they build up is their business. So in other words, it's okay to say no to jobs, which a lot of people don't. And to be fair, that's true across a lot of professions. Accountants especially tend to say yes to every client who walks in the door. You don't have to. Every now and again, you can say, no, you don't fit. Number 6 is failure to understand the business costs. What does it cost for you to open the door? Assume you've got no customers, no clients. What does it cost you to open the door? And what does it cost you to get through a week? So that's major. And then once again, it gets back to the first point. Once again, the critical one, have a cash flow. Understand the costs, where they're coming from. Understand the seasonality of the costs as well, because like revenue, they have seasons. Number 7, failing to understand the importance of your profit margin. So one of the great things about the design industry is you've got a brilliant gross margin usually. Construction, selling widgets, harder. Designers should be able to price their work in such a way that their gross margin is very good, if not excellent, because they're selling the concept. But if you discount and whittle away at that gross margin, the impact it has on the bottom line is multiplied by 3 or 4. So a 2% discount on a price for a job might mean that you've got to multiply your revenue by 4 times for the next job. That's how big that discount can be. So understand your margin and maintain your margin. And the last one is probably true of entrepreneurs, I think, number 8. And designers are often entrepreneurial. They don't put aside anything for themselves. It's all about a business. I need to build this business. I need to have a design business that everyone in the world loves, and that's great. But you need to pay attention to things outside of that for your own wealth creation. So you need to pay attention to how much you're paying yourself. Is it commercial? How much is going into your superannuation? Are your insurances in place? Have I got a will? Have I got enough money for a holiday? What sort of home do we need to buy, and therefore what sort of mortgage can we manage? So it becomes this big, broad financial plan outside of the business. And very, very regularly I came across the issue of a business going really well. How you going, boys? We're going really well. Everything's on fire. We're killing it. You're paying yourselves? Oh, not this month. We'll pay ourselves next month. So that can't happen. And if it does happen, it's alarm bells. So there's there's 8 common mistakes. As I said, not exhaustive, but they're the ones that jumped out at me.
It was like we just had a consultancy session. So
Yeah,
I
I'll
yeah,
send my invoice. Yeah, no,
yeah, yeah,
but
yeah.
it's a list that I suppose you could lay upon most professions.
100%. I think, full disclosure, I'm a hippie. So, but you said once in a session that we had, which struck me because I don't think of you as a hippie, but you said, is the plane staying in the sky or is it that there are 300 people willing it to stay in the sky?
Correct. Yes. Mm.
And so when you talked about forecasting, it does sound very sensible and organized, but my hippie side is like, yes, because then the universe knows what to deliver.
That's very hippie.
Full disclosure,
Yeah.
I am hiding in plain sight. I wear my cords on the inside. Um, so that kind of reminded me of that, which is great. But then also tracking back to the word entrepreneur, I think entrepreneur accidentally, whatever pop culture has hijacked its meaning to mean entrepreneur means you're good at starting businesses. Entrepreneur means you sell it for $1 billion. And I
Yep.
don't think that's right. And I think creative people and designers, commercial designers, artists can be entrepreneurial, but it's not all about the money
No.
game. It's about crafting a game out of the bigger game. Like
Correct.
I've found a niche. This is fun. It's exciting. And then what I think happens is real money gets made and or the investors come. Have you
Correct.
seen examples where that happens and it just goes tits up or really well?
Yeah, look, it's a very good point because at the risk of sounding like an angry old man, the modern interpretation of entrepreneur, in my view, is that it's okay to be a bit reckless. You know, how cool am I? I've started this startup. Everyone's got a startup, and I can be reckless because it's a startup and it's okay. Well, no, it's not. So the really good entrepreneurs oftentimes go broke in their early days, but they come back again and they're better than they were before. So for them, it's not reckless. It's not a joke. They think, gee, that was no good. I'll need to do that again. I've got examples, obviously, I'm not going to go through names and addresses, but I've seen that where really brilliant people hit a wall, sometimes through no fault of their own, but oftentimes because they were reckless and they probably didn't want to hear that. But to their credit, they come back and they don't do it again. So version number 2 is different. And to me, that's an entrepreneur. An entrepreneur is not someone who leaves a flaming mess in their wake and disappears into the night and opens up a cafe in Byron Bay. That's not an entrepreneur. But I think the second part of your question is, have I seen examples of that? Well, I touched on a second ago. Yes, I have. And most of them have been due to the fact that there is a misconception around creativity. As I said, it's got an element of recklessness to it. But the boring accountant comes along and says, no, you need a cash flow and you need a budget and you need a plan. And so I always regarded my role dealing with those people as kind of being a concrete footpath under their feet,
Yeah,
because otherwise they were walking on sand.
100%. And that's also not to say, I always talk about this as well in our meetings. I used to, but well, maybe I didn't, but I thought it is accounting is creative as well. Like you're designing a plan. Because design is
Yeah,
about boundaries and what can I create within that. And that's certainly what you did for us. And I think that's underplayed in the finance and accounting role is how creative, not to the point where the accountant's going to jail creative, but how
yeah,
creative is your accountant at applying lateral thinking to
yeah.
your situation.
Well, I think that's a good point. Accountants design a plan for their client, and the plan often includes what are you doing for yourselves outside of your business. But you've got finite resources, Mr. and Mrs. Client. I need to, as the accountant, need to deal with them appropriately that fits your circumstances. So in a way, there is a design factor around all that. What works for you and what doesn't work for you.
Yeah, it's been a real growth point for us as a business at Lex and a real pressure point as well. And in a really positive way, I have had a fin planner ask about our annual leave or holidays. And I was like, no, we
What?
work 24/7 and
Yes.
then sometimes 25/7. So that was why when the finance person's telling us to take a break,
Yep.
what
Yeah.
just
What?
happened?
They're asking you, they're being that concrete under your feet again, aren't they?
yeah, it's like the ballast to the ship because
Mm,
the great thing, but the hard, awful thing about working in design or creativity and selling it is you have to put your feet to the fire every time you
yes.
pitch, every time you present. You have to be vulnerable. Chris, who's the other half of Lex, he's been in the industry a lot longer than me, and the kid is like a vessel of creativity. It comes through. He doesn't
Mm,
take it personally. He just keeps going. Like he
mm,
gets the game at the table. He understands the commercial side, but especially for youngies, like it can be, you can get a professional knock at your first pitch and that's it. You just leave the industry,
yeah.
or you're not
You're
forward facing
crushed.
anymore. Yeah, you're destroyed. And especially because people think their
Mm,
creativity is them, but it's just
correct.
flow.
Well,
Um,
it's like
mm,
what, you download your brain to someone, the client, but it's not what they want. So you're crushed because they don't love you, but you haven't listened to them. And design people that I've worked with over the years tend not to be crushed, the good ones. They might come back to the office and go, that bunch of morons are dickheads. I'm not dealing with them again. But they're not crushed. So they believe in themselves. I think that's really important. But it's also important to understand that the boring people, the accountants, the lawyers, the bankers, play a really important role in you being creative. So you can't be creative if everything behind you is not under control.
that's it. That's the nugget. I think is there's two things in that. One is if your finance business people, bookkeepers don't understand how you work. So obviously I'm a nice enough person, but I'm not very easygoing and I don't care for admin at all. With every person
Like
that
your
works with
strength.
us, yeah, I'm like straight up. I'm not going to respond to emails. You need to write, and I just say write nag and then what you want in the subject
Right.
because that's just and that's
Yeah.
if we have to go down to text messages, that's the petulant child I am. But I work with people that can cope with my
Mm,
um, that kind, my lack of skills in that area. So there's that. But then also at the same time, I think the greatest thing with having a fin team, a business team, is they square you up and take you seriously. So whereas
yeah.
before, and especially in Australia, something like the creative industries and design in Australia is a hard. You talked about contracts earlier. It's no accident there's not many in Australia.
Mm,
A lot of people don't. It's not a really valued industry. It's prevalent.
mm,
It's proficient, but it's
mm,
not overly pedestal. It's not championed always. So yeah, when you get a team, someone like
mm,
yourself and or an accountant that takes you seriously, it's not that you're the boring people. It's that it's a mirror on yourself. Like, okay,
mm,
I take myself seriously. Do you take you to be serious? And that's a like a growth moment. It's painful, but it's
yeah.
wonderful. It's an exquisite, painful moment when that
It is
happens in a
painful.
cold, boring, like boardroom.
It is boring and painful, but you're right. It's really necessary. And I think that creative people are a bit guilty of regarding admin as a cost. But admin's not a cost. Admin is possibly one of your best assets. If you get the admin humming, it's like you've got 3 or 4 children at home and they're all behaving themselves and they're going to school and they're coming home and they're doing your homework. Can you imagine how good that would be? And the rest of your life would just hum from that. So imagine your children are your admin and you've got them all organized and everything's lovely and they're happy. The rest of your life is a bowl of cherries. That's sort of the best analogy I can come up with. What
Yes.
good admin is.
Yes, because I hold the admin in contempt. I just take stacks of paper and I just keep putting them in shelves.
Oh dear. We might turn you around one day, but
No, that's a pivotal moment. Yeah, yeah, showing a bit of love for the admin. That's
definitely.
not really going to hurt me at all. That's a super positive take out. Yeah, because we absolutely hold it in contempt. We're like, you can't stymie me. You can't put me in a
Yeah, that's it.
box.
You won't take my freedom. But do you think creativity comes out of the mundane? I mean, that's what I think, and I've seen it.
It should.
Yeah. So maybe designers are really good observers.
100%. If I was to, creativity, curiosity is what makes
Yeah.
a designer. Like
Yeah.
if you watch a natural designer in the wild,
Mm,
they will often be an observer. Like they'll be a bit further back. So they're not overly forward, chatty people. They can be, but not always. Watching from the sides. They're also, so, if they're in the 3D design, they'll be doing a lot of this.
mm,
They'll be like
looking at
looking
things.
how and how's that attached, and and I see,
Mm.
all right, so, and they're just it's pondering in the background.
Like mechanics or engineers, maybe.
100%. Industrial designer to me is a creative
Mm.
engineer.
Mm.
It's because like it's how it's made, and there's this misconception, and it drives me. It's sad, but all industries suffer it. That we all think a designer is wearing a beret, they've got a cape, they've got some kind of
That's right. Oh, that's what
imported
I see.
Japanese calligraphy pen, Pierre's whizzing around the world. And there are those designers, but I think it's it used to be, for me, it was a barrier to entry to get into design because I thought, I don't wear weird enough clothes, or
Yeah.
I don't look young enough, or I don't look old enough, and
Yeah.
then when you meet real designers who are in the background, like doing the grind and doing the real work, you wouldn't pick them out of a lineup of
No,
what they did.
they're
And
doing the
that's
mundane.
and the mundane as well. Like, we have a 10-year-old, and when
Mm.
we were little, when she was little, we used to, we lived in Hong Kong, and we had a gorgeous Filipina helper there, and she would play with Isla all the time. And I
Mm.
would have to say to her, you need to let Isla get bored. Because if she doesn't
Yes.
get bored, she's not going
Yeah.
to find anything. She's not going to get creative.
Spot on.
And
Spot on.
boredom to me is, just that exquisite, like, especially as a kid,
Wonderful.
if
Well, she
you're
would
bored
probably
and then
never
you
get
kind of,
bored.
exactly, no, now she's
Mm.
she's the most creative, exquisite little beast. Plus, she's an only child, so she has a lot of experience being bored. I can only play, I don't know, Twister for so long, and I hate the park. She had to learn to drink coffee pretty quickly. Um,
There's just one other thing too that I wanted to add on all that. And, once again, it could be universal across businesses, but perhaps more so for designers and creative people is you've really got to back yourself more than most people. You've got to value your ability and you've got to value your nous. One of the questions that comes up and has always come up in the design industry is, well, how do I price this? What's this job worth? And that's a really interesting question. There's probably no hard and fast answer. But if we go back to something I talked about before, understanding your costs, that could be the starting point. That doesn't mean that you just cover your costs. You've obviously got to have a margin, and it doesn't mean that that's what the job's worth. But it's got to be at least the costs plus a margin you think's reasonable. And there was one guy I dealt with and still know very well years ago who used to pitch for design work, and he was brilliant. And he'd have them eating out of the palm of his hand, and he'd say, "That's at the end of the meeting." He'd say, "This is what we're going to do for you, and that's going to cost you $100,000." And they'd all go, "Yep, no worries." And I'd talk to him later and go, "Wow, that's like 100 grand. That's phenomenal. How did you come up with 100 grand?" And he said, "It just felt like the right number."
I have a feeling I know this guy.
The thing I took out of that is he understood the value of what he was giving them, and they were happy to pay it. So that way covered the costs and why that business was largely successful. But he understood the costs as well, and he wasn't afraid to put a random number out there with a lot of support behind him, and a great presentation, and people paid, and that's because he valued what he was giving them. Now, is it worth 100 grand? I don't know. The client said it was, so it must be. And I think that might be the key to anyone starting in design or anyone mature in design for that matter. Pitch for what it's worth and be happy to say no. So I've always felt that if I was going to go broke, I'd rather be broke sitting on the couch watching the cricket than working 7 days a week for nothing. So it's okay to say no. All right, that's our figure, that's our price. We think it's worth that. We think you're getting value. Full stop. I'm not sure what your experience in that sort of area is, but it's the key for creatives. And yet I've dealt with writers, and get this. So writers get paid so many cents, or if they're lucky, $1 a word. Now, if you're Dickens, you're getting paid $1 a word, the same as Joe Blow down the road who writes comic books. It's crazy. And I don't think writers quite understand the value of what they write. But fortunately, designers are probably a step ahead of that. And, you've got something.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, we're traversing design industry. There's lots of different categories, but I so get what you mean. And it's the same fallacy across a lot of industries as well, is we can quote for a job and quote a time period of 4 weeks, which is very
Mm,
fast. And the reason we're very fast is like Chris is 20, 25 years in. Like
yes.
and so because, my background is writing. And so people will
Mm,
be like, oh, can you just quickly write something? I'm like,
mm,
I can. The reason I can do it quickly is because it's taken me 20 years to become very
correct.
fast. So,
Yes.
and so like even like the lawyer or theoretically or the accountant, anyone that gets paid by the hour, you get better as you go. So you can get
Correct.
more done in that hour. So theoretically, you'd be earning less every job you got because you can do it faster. So it's a mythical kind.
Absolutely.
So
Yeah.
I like that with the backing of what are your overheads, your margin. It
Mm,
also takes it out because the thing is with creatives is when you're going to create something for someone, you've got a brief, you're going to create something. It's very personal because you're creating it. It's not like
mm.
you're making, I need 15 tissue boxes, hit the machine, 15 go. If they say, no, it's too expensive, like, okay, how about 14 tissue boxes? Um, when it's your work
uh,
and the client questions it, you're like, oh, like
yeah.
you feel ashamed as well because it's all, and so they're coming at, especially B2B, it's business, baby, it's just numbers on a
Correct.
page.
Yep.
And for me it's fine, yeah, like we square up as per your advice, we square up our numbers and we know you know what we need to, like, just entry point, what the costs are, they are what they are, plus we know the experience we bring to the table. And ROI just isn't about the quote, it's not just the number. How
No.
fast can the agency get it done? How
Mm,
many variations are they going to be? Are you allowed to have? How quickly do they respond to emails? Are they on site? Are they available on site? What's their
mm,
experience? So something costs $10, but it's going to cost you $30 to get to the end. It's a
yeah.
fallacy. You may as well spend the 20 and save the 30. Like, it's
Correct.
so, and that's certainly something that you passed on to us, is delivering a proposal is one thing, explaining how you got to that number
Yep.
is everything for the client. So then they know,
Yep.
yeah, what they're getting.
Yeah. Spot on. And it gets back to being organized, doesn't it? Boring again. Being organized, understanding your costs, understanding your business, and communicating that to your client really well. And I guess, pre all that, listening to what they want.
Mm.
But, it's interesting that designers often work in a frantic sort of mode. But my idea of design was someone says, I want you to do this work. And I go outside in the park and light up a cigarette and look at the elm trees for an hour and fluff around. But it's not like that at all. So I always admire people who can be creative under pressure. I think it's a gift.
Yeah, like being creatively fit, it's a gift and it's something that you have to practice. When
Yeah.
people say, I can't draw, that's unless you don't, well, unless you have no appendage that you can pick up a pen with, anyone can
Mm.
draw. Can you draw well?
No.
That's a tangent. That's
Yeah.
a caveat. It's just creativity, but
Yep.
you've got to let it through and it pushes your buttons. It's got to be the same in finance as well when you come
Yep.
and you deliver the plan for someone. But
Totally.
because you've got it backed in something, that's the difference. Certainly with us as well, like what we
Yep.
do with retail design is we can't just go, let's use pink, it's cool. And that could be true. Pink is cool. But we have to be like, well, your target audience identifies with this, and historically you went to
Mm.
market with that. And all of our design is always rooted in something because,
Yep.
like, as you would have to be the hotshot international interior designer that everyone wants to work with, not to question. That's not good, especially commercial retail
Yep.
design. You got a lot of people at the table to please.
Yeah. No, I think that's right. And, that's why experience is, what people pay for, because the experience is the old saying, it took you 20 years to be an overnight success, but experience is an accumulation of a whole lot of errors and a few wins along the way. So you're worth what people are going to pay you. So I think it's important that designers, creatives in general, understand what they're worth, which means that, they've got to understand their market as well.
And to not take it personally.
Don't
I mean,
take
you
it
can,
personally.
you can
Yeah.
say no, but it doesn't have to get mucky or icky. You can just be
No.
like, oh, cool, we're not a good fit.
Yep. Say no and walk off. But you'll learn something from it. You learn more from your losses than your wins. And I think that you're going to step out of university with your design degree, or I'm not sure what it's called these days, but whatever degree that is in design, you're not going to know anything. You're going to think you know stuff, but you're not going to know anything. You'll need good people around you. You'll need to learn what you said before. You'll need to learn how to be fast and good, not just, I'll apply, chapter 4 to this client in Design 101. But
100%.
I'm not sure you can teach creativity. Maybe you can. It's either in you or it's not, but you can teach sound business principles to anyone. if they're willing
Yeah.
to listen.
Yeah, that's excellent advice as well, 100%. And just with the teaching, I think as well, when you're saying about listening to the client, delivering what they want, I call it the C word. Everybody puts it on their resume. Some people call it teamwork, collaboration.
Yeah,
And you
absolutely.
cannot create without, we can if you're an artist, you're a sole performer, but really design is all about collaboration. And when it works, it is the sweet spot. And
Yep.
when it's it's hard because you have to work with everyone's needs at the table. And that's being flexible and being able to collaborate and being a team player. Everybody glibly uses the word. I'm like, that is tough.
I don't even know what that means when they say I'm a team player. And what? Tell me about it. Yeah, collaboration is a way better way of putting it. Everyone needs a team around them who collaborate. And that goes right back to your accountant, your lawyer, your finance broker, your clients, and yourself. You've all got to pull it all together and work as a team. So I know I'm probably pushing the barrow for everyone to rush out there and love their accountant all of a sudden, but they do play an important role. And if they're not the right one, find another one. There's plenty of them out there.
Yeah, excellent advice. Thank you so much for your time today, Damian.
It's been great.
Been a treat. If anyone wants to find Damian O'Donnell, he is on LinkedIn. Feel free to connect with him there. And yeah, thank you again, Damian. It has been so insightful.
Thanks for having me on.